Hello, and welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
This is the podcast about murders and so much more. We will talk about anything strange, anything that goes bump in the night, and pretty much anything that amuses us.
And on that note, we need to mention that this podcast is not safe for work or delicate ears, so do be discerning who you listen to it with.
We also want to let you know that you can find us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram, so look for us there.
I am Shannon Lawrence. I am a writer, mom, wife, student, procrastinator, and you can find me at thewarriormuse.com.
My name is MB Partlow. I am a writer, an avid reader, an organizer extraordinaire, a mom to kids, cats, and a dog, and I call bullshit when I see it. Hello.
Hello, and welcome to the week after Halloween. Hopefully it was nice and spooky for everybody.
Hopefully you got lots of candy. If that's what you
if
wanted.
You wanted it. Yeah.
Or liquor, whatever.
I've always had to go through because my kids couldn't have the dyes for medical reasons. And so as I would have them check in here and there. And then when they were little, and then I'd take out all the dyed stuff like Starburst and Skittles and lollipops, and I'd put them into my bucket. So then I always refilled my bucket from their stuff. And then was handing that stuff out. And then, but they're big enough now that if they're not really going to have the same reactions they did. And if they get bitchy because of the dyes, then I can be like, go to your room. And also, see, we're recording this before Halloween, sadly, so I can't say what I did, but I'm pretty sure my son's not going any sort of trick-or-treating. And I'm hoping just to rope them into giving out the candy so I don't have to, but I'm putting out books this year, and so we'll see.
That's true.
I did not last year.
I did not last year either. I didn't turn on my light. I didn't carve a pumpkin. I was like, stay the hell away from me.
Oh, it was still super busy last year, despite COVID.
It was not busy. Well, either that or in our neighborhood, they clued in because there was no light on. I mean, the lights were on in the house. We weren't sitting in the dark, but...
Yeah, I've had people in the past, I was pissed one time. I was so rude because we had turned out the lights because I had younger kids and it was bedtime. And it was late anyway. Nobody was really coming around. So we turned out all the lights, turned out all the stuff, turned off all our decorations. It was very clearly dark. And the whole entire front of our house was dark.
Yeah.
And so the only light on was like our living room in the back on purpose. And somebody came and fucking rang the doorbell late. And they did it again. When I didn't answer, so I go and I fling open the door. And it's two kids and their fucking parents sitting in a car at the end of our driveway, like, yay! And I was like, I don't have anything for you. Did you not notice the lights are off? Do you not know what that means? Like, fuck off.
Yeah.
So, anyway. I imagine they went to, everybody had shut down. We're usually one of the last ones to shut down because I tend to chase down teenagers and dump all the stuff I took away from my kids into their bags. They love it.
For me, every year, it's a mental battle. Do I buy the candy that I like to hand out, or do I buy the candy I don't like to hand out?
We always get what we like. There's a bag sitting right
I can see it. It's waving at me.
It is, I know. Like the kids have both been like, well, can we have one? No, you can't. It doesn't get open until Halloween.
If you open it, is one bag going to be enough?
No, it's not. And so I'm surprised that that's all he got. So, I don't know.
Maybe he's hidden some in the garage.
What? Oh, it's so weird. But maybe. Who knows? Or he's willing to run out and get it cheap that night. I have no idea.
Is it cheap that night? I know it's cheap the next day.
The next day.
So, I had a funny thing happen at work I wanted to tell you about. It made me laugh. After it happened, it made me laugh really hard. And it made one of my coworkers laugh really, really hard. So, an older woman comes in. So I work at a consignment shop. This older woman comes in and she says, I have a consignment. I said, great. I've got a rack right here for you to put your clothes on. And she's an older woman, as I said. So she just gives me this look. And I said, do you need some help? And she goes, I am 75 years old. I'm handicapped. Yes, I need help. Okay, ma'am. Let me...
Then say you need help.
Then maybe, I'm like, clue me in. I can't read your mind. So
I know plenty of 70-year-olds that would be offended if you asked them if they needed help.
Right. So I'm like, okay, how much stuff do you have? And she said, I've got 2 big boxes full. So immediately I'm thinking, oh shit. Because we ask people to bring stuff in on hangers. You can't bring stuff. But also, we don't argue with cranky 75-year-old people. So I go in the back and I get Carol and I say, can you help me carry this woman's stuff? And Carol's like, oh yeah, no problem. So we go out in the parking lot, and whenever I go in the parking lot and I have to like insert half of my body into someone's vehicle, I always have this, is this going to be the last time anyone ever sees me? I told you the whole minivan story. But this was a car. It was daylight, and Carol was right there. I'm like, Carol would at least call 911.
Right.
I can't see this little lady trying to boot me into her car and driving off. So we walk out, and she kind of gestures at her car, and she goes, it's in the back seat. Alrighty then. So I open the back seat of her car, and there's like it's not a shoebox, but it's like one very light, medium-sized box in a grocery bag. And I'm like, I could have carried this in by myself. So I hand Carol the box. I pull out the box. So I lean back in, and the bag is on the floor of the car. So I'm kind of bent over. You know how graceful I am. My ass is in the air. I'm bent over, and I'm trying to get everything into the bag because it's stuff that has like straps on it, like bathing suit straps, and they're apparently partially sentient. They're trying to get out, and the woman screams and slams her hands down on the trunk of the car.
Okay.
So apparently that's when I learned how to levitate. So it was like, I can't believe how high you jumped, or at least the half I could see if you jumped into the air when that happened. So I whipped my head out of the car, and we're staring at her, and she's just looking at us like, what's up? And I was like, because I'm thinking she's had a heart attack or she's fallen.
There's a bee?
And she goes, I said, are you all right? She goes, oh yeah, I'm fine.
Well, then what the fuck,
and
bitch?
I was like, and we just kind of stand there for a second looking at her, and she goes, oh, I have Tourette's.
Oh.
It was like, I said, well, you kind of scared the crap out of me. And I looked at Carol and I said, not kidding, gonna go in and change. It just scared the... So we get her stuff in the store, and she comes in, and she's like, is there someplace I can sit down? And I said, yes, there's a chair right here. So we're pulling her stuff out of the box in the bag. And she does it again. And I jumped again because you don't expect, so ma'am, how are you today? Ah! Just this blood-curdling scream. So she only did it one more time, but I did not jump that time.
Oh, good.
I had to go in the back room and explain, because we had a couple of employees back there, and go, did you hear that scream? And they were like, yeah. Oh my God, was that in our parking lot? It sounded so close. Do we need to call 911? And I was like, nope, it's just Tourette's.
It's just Tourette's.
And she went on about how, usually it strikes people when they're young, but I didn't get it till I was 60.
Oh no, I don't want to hear that can develop later.
Right? And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe she's cranky and frustrated and just likes to fuck with people. And I thought to myself, maybe screaming periodically is just, relieves tension.
Lord.
But what a way to do it.
Oh, man. Yeah. I'm glad I don't work retail.
And then I'm on the phone, like 5 minutes after the woman leaves, I am on the phone with a customer, and Carol screams. She's behind the counter. Now, she does not scream as loud. It's more of a shriek. And she jumps up and back. And I'm like, hold on, ma'am. It's like, what? Because I'm kind of like, what? Is there somebody in here with a knife or a gun that I need to know about? And it was a spider. And it was not that she had been bent over to pick something up, and it like almost crawled up her hand. It just, it surprised her.
I was at the doctor's office the other day and heard, so we're waiting for my son to go get an audiology test, hearing test. And we're sitting in this little waiting room, and all of a sudden I hear somebody like shriek, and then there's the gibbering voices. And, I can't get to it. It's all over there. And I was like, oh, there's a spider in somebody's office. It was hysterical. Like, it went on for probably like 15 minutes, them trying, because it was in a corner and they couldn't get around this, and they didn't have anything to reach that high. And one of them was like, that's okay, I can work in my car today. And she was just freaking out. And I'm just sitting there laughing. And the thing is, we were the youngest people in that little waiting area for the hearing test. So there's a whole bunch of elderly people. Half of them couldn't hear it at all. So I know how their test turned out, but so I'm laughing and they're just looking at me trying to figure out why I'm laughing. Oh, we had to wait over an hour to get called in for that test.
Oh why did
my son was like, can we just leave and do it another time? And I'm like, then we'll have to wait another hour that time.
Why did he need an audiology test?
So he had a tube put in his ears a couple years ago because he had constant ear infections. And we went, I just had his normal, the tube comes out after a year on its own and no big deal. And it was supposed to be all better. We went to his pediatrician and she was like, so you said he had a tube in his ear, right? Well, I can't see the tube, so I don't think it's in there anymore, but he has an ear infection. And she's like, don't you have any pain? And he's like, no. So she was like, you need to go back to the ENT. So we did.
You're like, yay.
Yeah, so it was funny. It was the non-tube ear that had the infection.
Oh.
And they just gave him some drops because it was pretty minor. But then they looked and they were like, there's negative pressure. So his eardrum is basically being sucked inward on the side that had the tube. So now they're talking about another tube. So in other words, more medical expenses.
Yay.
And another surgery for him. This will be his third.
He's got to be so
Or no, I'm sorry, his fourth.
That.
His fourth surgery, and he's 16. So no, he's like, I don't want a tube. It's not hurting me. It's not. They did the hearing test because they're like, well, are you having problems hearing? And he's all, no, not really. And they're like, oh, yeah, we're going to test it anyway. Yeah. And so it actually is really good, but it is below the other ear. But it was still like good hearing. And they're like, still we have to discuss what to do. And he's like, and the doctor said, this could just be the way your ear is always meant to be, so we got to figure that out. But we don't want it to get really bad again in 2 years. And then you're having the same problems over and over where you have painful ear infections all the time. So I don't know. That's why. It was pretty funny though. Yeah, there was this little guy. He wasn't little. There was an old guy, and he just, when we walked in and sat down, and we all had to shuffle because there were one seat here, one seat there. One lady very nicely said, "I'll move so you can sit together." So anyway, then she sits next to him, and he kind of snorks awake and looks at us, and he goes, "I didn't even see you coming in. I was dozing." And then 5 minutes later, that man was out, and his head's just hanging, and he's just zonked. Straight up, not loud snoring, nothing like that. Just quiet, deep breathing. And at one point, there's only us and one woman left and him, right? And somebody walks by, and I forget his name now. I knew it then, but I think it was like, Edgar, I'll be back for you in a few minutes. And she walks by, no register whatsoever. And she comes back out like 10 minutes later, and she's like, all right, Edgar, I'm ready for you. And I'm like, so I think that's Edgar right there, and you're going to have to wake him up. Not my job.
If you are in the waiting, if your patients are in the waiting room long enough that they fall that deeply asleep, maybe there's a problem.
Well, the problem is that they had one audiologist, right? And a lot of these were spur of the moment. Like we hadn't pre-booked for a hearing test because it wasn't probably going to be an issue. See?
Gotcha.
And the doctor had skipped it the first appointment when he gave him the stuff for the ear infection, said, come back and we'll look at everything after that's gone. And then anyway, so he's like, are you guys okay with hearing tests? And we're like, yeah. And so there must have been several incidents like that where they're like, I'm going to have you do a hearing test because you've gotten worse or something. And so this one girl was just, she comes running out. At one point I hear her get to the office over here and go, are they trying to kill me? So I knew she was slammed. And so when she came out to us, she was just super apologetic and everything because the person before us, she was irritated, and rightly so, because she'd come for her appointment and her doctor had just, without even seeing her, decided she needed a hearing test. She's like, I don't need a hearing test. And if she heard everything, fine. We talked to her. And she was like, I don't understand why now I haven't even been seen by my doctor. My appointment was over an hour ago and I'm still, so she was very polite, but edging toward, she was about to leave when the woman came out and got her. She was like, nah.
Thing two went for an appointment and her person had left the practice.
Oh,
and that's the second time it happened.
Oh, that was her that posted. That's right.
Yes, that was the second time at that practice that they had someone leave and they didn't even bother to call their appointments say.
I think that's
shitty.
Enough strikes for her, or
yes, but she had a thing she had to do. Yeah. Is that vague enough? You know what I'm talking about.
We're HIPAA-ing it. Yes.
We're hip hop hippity.
Hippity, ha.
Just like what the flip floppity flapjack and fuck.
I watched a whole
What you watch?
conversation. Oh no, this conversation on Facebook about whether anybody has the right to ask you if you're vaccinated or whatever, which I'm not going to go into all that, but it was pretty funny listening to the things and hearing people who are medical professionals try and explain that HIPAA actually doesn't cover that. That covers people involved with your medical records not being, like your doctors and stuff, not being able to. It's actually not illegal to ask somebody if they've been vaccinated.
Okay. Good to know.
So anyway, that's the short of it. But anyway, just watching, I know there's a no comments rule, but I actually like to read the comments. Mm-hmm. Except there are certain topics I know I won't because I'll get mad. If I won't get mad about the comments, I love to read them because there's so much dumb in the comments.
Yes.
And watching people just painstakingly try to explain things to people and here's what this is. And also the people who really don't know HIPAA, they use the wrong letters. Because everybody defaults to HIPPA instead of HIPAA. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, and then people arguing back with somebody who's a medical professional and just saying, you don't know what you're talking about. You're an idiot. And it's like, and they're all, here's a link. And the person's like, I'm not going to click on your bullshit link. And it's just, I love to watch.
It's like to the National Institute of Health or.
Right. Or whatever. But yeah. And they're just plain, they're so adamant that they're right without actually looking up if they're right.
Oh, yeah.
So it
That's
entertains
the best
me.
kind of right.
But now we can talk about what we watched.
Okay. What did you watch?
So since everything was dark last week, I watched The Starling on Netflix with Melissa McCarthy.
How was that?
It was good. It's slower. It's not at all funny, despite the main actors. There are comedic moments.
It's on Netflix, you said?
Yeah. And Kevin Kline is in it. And he is, as always, delightful. I will always love him. And he's doctor. So their child died.
Yes.
Sid. And her husband has had a complete breakdown and been put into a mental facility because of it. And she's just powering through and trying to just keep going. And she kind of loses it. Her husband, she shows up to visit her husband like she does every week. And he said he doesn't want to see her. And so she kind of loses it. And then one of the people working there says, here, talk to this person. So she goes to the address on the card and asks for the person. and it's a veterinarian's office. And in the meantime, there's a starling that's just attacking her repeatedly. Like bombing her outside her house. So she wears a helmet and it just keeps coming after her. And it's pretty funny because sometimes you get the bird's view and stuff like that. So it is not completely serious.
Right.
But it is not a comedy at all. It is a drama with some jokes and asides. But it was good. Yeah, everybody did a good job.
To watch that.
Yeah, I was a little annoyed with the husband. It's a personal problem.
Chris O'Dowd, right?
Is that his name? Is he Irish or? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it's Chris O'Dowd.
I couldn't. I'm like, here, she's doing fine. She had that baby in her body, and she is trying to power through. And you have just the actor, and I also watched Britney versus Spears.
Oh, how was that?
Which is a documentary on, was it? I think it was Netflix. It was good. She's been popping up and there's memes and there's been talk about what was going on with her and her father specifically, who was given control over her money and her.
Yes.
And I think it was 12 years of him holding that control.
And I understand when
abusing it.
When she seemed to be having the public breakdowns, I understand that she needed help, but I'm like, has she not been getting...
The thing is, I don't even know if then she needed that help. I think he was able to use the publicness of it to his advantage to become her conservator. Anyway, she's free now. That's been announced since the document. The documentary, I don't believe she was free yet. It was said at the end that she was trying. Mm-hmm. But it is absolutely astounding watching it. I don't care how you feel about Britney Spears. Watch it and see how easy it is in a court. Once somebody has been made your conservator... Mm-hmm. Trying to get that back, she couldn't even hire her own lawyers because her father would say, oh, no, she's not mentally well enough. And they would listen to him even though she was trying to get out from under him. The judges repeatedly looked at her like she was a stupid little girl who had no control over herself. And then he was slipping her lithium
What?
instead of her actual prescription, like her original prescription. Like he had control over every part of her and he was able to make it so she wasn't well enough, right? But he was still making her perform because it was up to him. He was booking it.
Drop dead.
He does. Yeah. So anyway, it's a really interesting documentary. I think it'll be very eye-opening for people.
I might have to watch that. I'd heard about it and I heard it was
I had read some stuff about what was going on before that, but yeah, it goes over it in more detail and people will be horrified. I'm telling you.
I thought it was a temporary
12 years.
When it hit the news again, I was astounded. I'm like, wait, that's still going on?
Uh-huh. And by the way, he took more of her money than he was paying himself to be her conservator. He also controlled all the money and he paid her an allowance of her money that she was making.
How thoughtful.
Yeah, wow. I don't know how he can show his face anywhere in public. I mean, even ex-boyfriends of hers came on to say the reason we broke up is he wouldn't allow her to, he was stepping in everything. And they were seeing, he controlled if she could see her kids, and he kept telling her that she wouldn't be able to see her kids if she pushed something, for example. What
a bastard.
It was awful. Yeah, so anyway.
I hope his testicles get full of broken glass.
I hope karma visits him tenfold. Yeah. Or, in a witchy way, threefold, but...
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? Did you watch anything more cheerful than that? Or?
I did.
Okay, good.
By God, we're not being very cheerful these days. But I watched The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard.
Oh, yeah.
Which I called The Hitman's Bodyguard's Wife. And then I went, wait, that's not right.
I know. I
got the words.
I have to think it through to say it.
The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. So it was dorky and goofy and funny. It was exactly what I expected it to be. I did like...
And I warned you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. It was filthy in parts. How long has that been out? That's been out for quite a while, hasn't it?
Like a year? Not a year. It has been out for...
But it's been out for a few months. So, spoilers, you're getting them. I like the Morgan Freeman role.
Yeah.
I very much like that he was such a dick. Because he's the voice of God. Everybody loves him. And that he was just such a dick in this movie.
Yeah.
Loved it. And I loved... what's his name? The main character.
Ryan Reynolds?
Thank you. I loved his whole... He's got this little penknife. It's the only thing he'll carry. Nobody ever expects a penknife. And he says that through the whole movie. Yeah. So I was like, that's right. As a dedicated penknife carrier, I was very much into that. I started watching something again that I had forgotten about. Something that I really, really like. There's a British talk show called The Graham Norton Show.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that so much. So their first episode of the new season, they had the cast of the new James Bond movie on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really funny. He just gave Daniel Craig a full ration of shit, and Daniel Craig took it with very good grace. Because it was the whole, aren't you too old to play James Bond now?
Was he just trying to be cheeky?
He was. And it was all, because he'd asked...
Daniel Craig doesn't even like playing the role. So.
No, he'd ask Daniel Craig a question, and Daniel Craig would be like, oh my God, we filmed that so long ago, I don't remember. He is excited to be doing other things.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a talk show, but it's a British talk show. They had Andie MacDowell on. It was a different episode. And she said... Yeah. So she said something, fuck, blah, blah, blah. And it was the same episode that Billy Porter is on.
Like I would know.
Do you know who I'm talking about?
Nope.
Oh. He's kind of fabulous. He's an actor. He's very fashionable. He was at some awards ceremony. I'm sorry, I can't remember which one. And he had on this outfit, and it was a fitted tux down to the waist, and then it belled out into this gorgeous ball gown.
Okay.
So it was both the tux and the gown. It was absolutely... Well, he was on, and he goes, excuse me, I was told we couldn't say that word. Or no, first he said... I'm trying to remember if he said... I thought we couldn't say that word. And Graham Norton is like, got his head in his hands. He's like, you can't. And Andie MacDowell's like, what are you going to do? Fuck, fuckity, fuck.
That's the thing.
And they're bleeping. It's all bleeped, but it was...
Is you expect her to be all proper. She is a Southern belle from Georgia, right?
Oh, yes.
And she's not.
Not at all.
Proper. But I saw her in like, what was it? Magic Mike 2 XXL or whatever the hell it's called.
I didn't see that one.
And she's, she's naughty. And the whole time you're just like, oh, but Andy, I mean, she's not over the top. It's funny. It's a group of Southern women that just are naughty because they show up at the house because of her daughter. So anyway, I don't think she's as proper as we've always thought she was.
Nope. So the other thing I've been watching is the new season of the Great British Baking Show because I find that extremely soothing.
Yeah.
The people are just so nice. The contestants are all nice to each other. There's no smack talk. And if there is, it's so tender and goofy and fun-loving. And, I find it.
Is this the one that is going to have James McAvoy on it? Or
it's that show, but it's not this season. They do a special fundraiser every year. I want to see
That's why people were freaking out that they couldn't watch the McAvoy one here in America.
Yeah, no. It's, they do... celebrity ones every once in a while. Those are hilarious because they get people in there who are like, is this an egg? What do I do with it?
I did see when they had the staff of, it's a teenage movie. And I actually talked about it on here at one point, but I can't remember what it was now. But it's, like an inappropriate
Dairy Girls
TV show. There we go. Dairy Girls.
Dairy Girls. Yes.
I saw when they were on there. Everybody wants James McAvoy on there so they can listen to him talk. And, watch him talk.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, I just remember everybody freaking out about it. And I was like, well, just fucking wait until it's God, get over it.
It'll get here eventually.
Calm your panties, I guess. But I am watching a baking show. I intend to talk about it now. I can't remember what it's called, but they call on the people on it baconeers because they have one baker and one engineer per team, and they aren't friends. They're assigned to these people, and so every project they do involves.
Is this the Halloween one?
Yeah.
Oh.
Involves some sort of baking project. I mean, most of each thing has to be edible.
Right.
But it also has to work in an engineering sense. So there's like one where they have to build these vehicles made out of food, but also with the mechanics inside.
Oh my God.
So that they can, and it's remote control, and they have to drive it around a course where it's like, there's like a bed of marshmallows, and they have to drive it. You'd be surprised how hard it is to drive a little like a remote control thing through marshmallows. And then like there's little pendulums swinging and it has to drive through them. So anyway.
Oh my God.
And then one was like making a dress.
What is this one called?
Well, I just told you I don't know. I didn't intend to talk about it.
I'm like, oh my God, I have to watch this.
It's on Netflix though, and it keeps coming up because it's a new release. So, but it's not like baconeering or anything like that. So I don't remember what the title is.
Right, baking show on Netflix. Baking with Engineer.
Yeah. So anyway,
I bet I can just Google that and it
probably or Google baconeer. So, what have you read?
Baconeer. I'm slowing down. I'm in the middle of a book, so I won't talk about a book I'm in the middle of. But I did reread Judgment in Death by J.D. Robb.
Oh yeah, okay.
I just love.
I'm so behind on those.
Oh, this was an early one. This had to be this. I'm gonna guess this might have been number 4-ish in the series. And so I enjoyed it. To me, I like her relationship with her husband. I like her relationship with her coworkers. I like her vision of the future. I don't think it's realistic, but that's okay. I don't read for realism. I read for escapism.
It's at least consistent.
Yes, and it's set in the future, but not far in the future. And it's after the urban wars, and the main character is Eve Dallas, who's a police lieutenant, and she has married a very wealthy man, fallen in love with and married a very wealthy man who used to be, they're
Irish
both hot.
Rourke.
Yep. And he used to be, he came up as a thief. He was abandoned by his family as well. And so it's this great love story, because you know how in a typical love story, people get married and they live happily ever after. Oh, they do not.
No.
They have issues. And they really have to work on them. They get mad at each other.
Well, she's fiery hot.
Yes.
But he's not so much fiery hot, but he can be obstinate. I mean, it's been a while since I read one.
Yes.
But he can be very obstinate and do things that she doesn't agree with.
Yes.
And then she gets fiery hot about those things. And he's stubborn, so he's not going to give in to her.
And there's a lot of very hot sex.
Yeah. Because Okay, who's J.D. Robb? Isn't it Nora Roberts?
Yes, Nora Roberts. I was like,
it is a romance author who decided to go make kind of this sci-fi thriller romance. Like, I don't even know how she builds it.
They're mysteries because each one there's a crime to be solved.
Right.
So technically, I'm calling them mysteries.
Are they mystery or thriller?
Oh, maybe they'd be called thrillers.
So see, it's very complicated.
It's a mystery thriller.
Nobody would have been able to pitch this shit if they weren't Nora Roberts wanting to write under. You know, because they get so picky about genre and pitching it correctly.
Nora Roberts,
this didn't fit into any niche.
She could probably publish her grocery lists now if she wants to, and we will all buy it and enjoy it.
I mean, I don't read Nora Roberts, but I read J.D. Robb. So
I haven't read a ton. I've read some that I've liked a lot. I've read some that I was like, well, okay, it's not for me. She's a good writer. She's a prolific writer. So, if she would like to sponsor our podcast, we would love that.
She does use her power for good, though, because she uses it to help further take care of things that happen in the romance world.
Yes.
And she can protect authors that are smaller than her. So,
and she writes a ton of trilogies.
She's bloody prolific.
Yes.
She writes so much.
And she wrote what'd you call it, dystopian? Your middle brother read one because you posted something and he wrote about reading that book and I wrote, oh, I'm reading that book.
I didn't read that book, so I couldn't tell you. I have 4 siblings. I cannot keep track of their reading.
Well, what is wrong with you?
I don't know.
So what have you read?
I read... First thing, this is one of the ones I kept not mentioning because I couldn't remember if I'd mentioned it because I talked to you about it. I talked to you about the Starling too, so then I was like, did I actually do it on an episode or not?
But not.
Anyway, Reviving Ophelia, Saving the Lives of Adolescent Girls by Mary Pfeiffer, PhD. So it was written in the 90s when I was an adolescent girl, oddly enough. And just some of the stuff she covered in there hit really close to home. Of course, I didn't know that. I went into it reading it because I'm a mom of a adolescent girl. So it's really good. I mean, I'm sure there are aspects of it that are somewhat out of date, like maybe the extent of the threats, but really and some of them are not as big a deal as they were in the 90s now because things have changed with the new generation.
And I don't think she didn't talk about social media.
No, I don't think social media...
It didn't exist back then.
Was on it. But yeah, it covers just so many things. Highly recommend for anybody who has a teenage girl or works with teenage girls.
Loved it. Yeah. I found it gave me... I was like, oh my God, I'm not alone.
Yeah. So it's just... She breaks it down and she has case studies for each and just, all right, what about teenagers dealing with sex? And it's all aspects. It's not just pregnancy, which is what you usually see. It's what they were dealing with from their boyfriends and boyfriends trying to force them to do something they weren't comfortable with and ones who wanted to do, she covers every facet and drugs and just in horrible home lives and stuff like that. Abuse, eating disorders. I mean, I read this a couple months ago, but she really runs the gamut of it.
She really does.
In a very caring way.
And it's written in a very engaging style.
Yes.
It does not read like... Because a lot of times, and it's not self-help, but these books can be very dry, or they can be full of jargon that you don't get. This is not. It's like sitting down and talking to a friend.
Yeah, and she is good about citing statistics where it's necessary and stuff like that, studies. So it's good. And now it's your turn.
Okay, so I'm going to start this week. We're going to talk about the unsolved Hinterkaifeck murders. That's what I said, and I'm sticking with it. So my sources are... No, I did not sneeze. My sources are Parade Magazine, peoplehistory.com, hotels.com. Oh, Wikipedia. I can't believe I forgot to write down Wikipedia, but no, I do have it in here. Because Wikipedia.
Did you notice last episode there was no Wikipedia for J.C. and Jelinski that came up?
Wow.
Or for the murderers.
Wow.
Nor did I.
No. No, my murders were not in Murderpedia or in...
Crazy!
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia, you're getting slack.
Yes, hotels.com and a German language website that I translated some stuff from. So despite my, because you all know, all of our regular listeners know, I have an obsession with axe murders, which I think are more appropriately called hatchet murders. There are worse things that could fall to hand in a crime of opportunity. So here I go, setting the stage. The year is 1922. Yes, we're going back now. 1922. The USSR is created in 1922, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics.
CCCP. And no, I don't remember how to say anything except for the P is public for republic. Yes. My dad used to know it.
In the U.S., the Lincoln Memorial was dedicated in Washington, D.C. Wimbledon Stadium was opened by King George V. Okay. I just was like, okay, all this. Reader's Digest was created. I am the best at finding random facts for any year. The BBC was formed. Gandhi was thrown in prison. And the New York Times mentioned Hitler for the first time in 1922. So.
He hadn't been Person of the Year yet?
Yeah, not quite. So, these examples are not limited to the U.S. because for this episode, for this part of this episode, we're going to Bavaria in Germany. Bavaria is Germany's largest state and a popular tourist destination. And I was like, why? Thus the hotels.com.
Bavarian cocoa.
It's because of the scenery. They have everything from ancient castles to alpine peaks to gorgeous lakes. And it's the culture. It's Lederhosen and sausage. Lederhosen, sausage, beer festivals.
Easy for you to say.
Apparently not. So, on March 31st of 1922, an entire family was slain on the Hinterkaifeck farm near the tiny village of Kaifeck, which is now part of Weidhofen. And I apologize. I never took German in school, so I'm sure I'm butchering these names, and I apologize.
If it's a W, you say it like a V.
V.
Does that fix half your words?
It fixed one. Weidhofen. This is about 40 miles, a little bit more than 40 miles north of Munich, if you're up on your geography.
Nope.
Which I never am, but it's in Germany. The member of the families were all killed with a mattock, which is like a pickaxe. So we're not far from hatchets, but it's the thing that's got the axe head on one side and the adze on the other, the big flat bladed, which is not an uncommon thing to have on a farm.
Okay.
So the people killed included spouses Andreas and Kazelia Gruber, their widowed daughter Victoria Gabriel, Victoria's children Kazelia, who is age 7, and Joseph, age 2, and the family maid Maria Baumgartner.
You should have saved this one for Christmas because the last name was Gruber.
Yeah,
and it's totally a Christmas movie.
I totally agree. Yes, every time I see Gruber, I think Hans Gruber. While the family, including the daughter Kazelia, appear to have been lured into the barn through the stable, one at a time, murdered, and then stacked.
Uh-huh.
That was the thing that got me. They stacked the bodies.
Like they weren't even people.
Yeah. 2-year-old Joseph was killed in his crib, and Maria was killed in her bed, but they were all killed with the same weapon.
There's something mildly reassuring about that. I mean, the baby wouldn't have seen it coming, so...
Yes. So after the crime was finally discovered, it took a few days. I'll get to this. Authorities learned that whoever killed the family lived on and cared for the farm for a few days.
Mm-hmm.
The cattle were fed, the dog was tended, meals were cooked and eaten in the kitchen, and neighbors reported seeing smoke rising from the chimney. Now, I question that because my thought was... Would you really, if you see something every day, do you know that you saw it yesterday? Or do you just have this generic memory of it? It makes absolutely no difference. It's just where my mind went when I read that. You would notice if their fire wasn't burning. If it was cold weather, I mean, It was in March. It was still snowing. So I don't know that you would particularly notice, oh, look, the smoke I see every day is there, but you might notice if it wasn't. Anyway, the mailman definitely saw the dog on a Saturday and the bodies were discovered the next day. So poor Maria, the maid, was killed the same day she was hired.
Yeah.
The previous maid had quit 6 months earlier because she said the house was haunted.
Yeah, that's why I have my theories.
Yeah. Maria's sister had accompanied her to the farm to drop her off, and they believed that she was probably the last person to see the family alive. So, over those 6 months, the family reportedly heard footsteps and voices in the attic. Now, Andreas did search the building and found nothing. I believe he searched more than once because they heard these noises and he would go up and search. At the same time, though, he refused any help doing the search. A house key had gone missing. The door to the tool shed had scratches around it as though someone had tried to pick their lock. And Andreas had also reported seeing an unfamiliar pair of footprints in the snow leading from the edge of the woods to the back entrance of the house. Like a week earlier. So on what date did I say? March 31st. So on April 1st, 2 coffee sellers approached the farm to take an order. It seemed like this was a regular thing. But nobody answered their knocks, so they walked around the yard, didn't see anybody, so they left. Now, the little girl, Kazelia, they noted that she was absent from school and the family didn't show up for Sunday worship services. I think that was the one that really alerted them to go looking. A repairman, I'm sure he wasn't called that back then, but a repairman went by on April 4th to repair an engine. He didn't hear anything from the house, but because he heard normal barn noises from the animals, he could hear like the cattle and the dog. He just completed his repair and left. It's kind of like Mayberry that way. So later that same day, Lorenz Schlittenbauer sent his sons over to make contact with the family. When they came back and said they didn't see anyone, Lorenz and his friends went to check out the situation, and they found the bodies in the barn first, and then they found the 2 bodies in the house. So the police inquiry was hampered by the fact that so many people had been in and out of the crime scene since the murder was committed. Authorities discovered, now here's the really sad part, the younger Kazelia, not her grandmother, had not died immediately, and she had lived long enough to pull some of her own hair out where she was laying in the straw. So the authorities declared that a mattock was the most likely murder weapon, although it was never found on the scene. At first they suspected robbery as a motive, and they questioned all the travelers, all the peddlers, all the vagrants in the vicinity. But then they discovered a large sum of money still in the house, and apparently not like hidden. So they discounted robbery. No, that was not it. Another theory was that the family heard something in the barn, that the animals were disturbed, so they went to check one at a time. That's how we investigate things. But police later realized, they must have tested this somehow, that the barn noises couldn't be heard from within the house, nor could the sound of human screams. Because apparently they had someone go in the barn and scream while they had people in the house, and you can't hear it. So that's out the window. There was a neighbor who passed by on the night of the murder who said he smelled something foul being burned in an oven, but there's no record that that was ever investigated or they searched to find out what was being burned.
Right.
And nothing was obviously missing, and it wasn't any of the people.
Not odd even now, people in rural areas still burn. I mean, if you go to Oregon, there's burn season where it's legal and not legal. And
you have a burning barrel out back.
Yeah. And we have one at our cabin. There's a burn barrel. We just haven't used it. But it's full from the previous people.
But it must have been an unfamiliar smell. Yeah. I mean, if he was a neighbor, they burned stuff. But no, that went nowhere. So there was a question, and this is where it gets freaky. There was a question about Victoria's husband, Carl Gabriel. He was reportedly killed in an air attack in 1914 during World War II in France. So since his body was never recovered, some speculated that he had returned and committed these murders for some unknown reason, because she had, I don't know. I didn't say why, just he came back. Wikipedia pointed out that if he had been gone since 1914, he couldn't have fathered Joseph, who was born in 1919. So...
God, that would be a long gestation.
So... Joseph's father may have been the neighbor Schlittenbauer that Victoria reportedly had a relationship with, but there's also a lot of speculation that she could have had an ongoing incestuous relationship with her father. It was unclear from the sources because some seem to think it was a forced relationship and some seem to imply that it was a voluntary relationship.
Sorry, but it's still not fully voluntary. Just like, I know you know, but just like, say, sexual harassment at the job when it's your boss. It can be as voluntary as you claim it is, but there's a power play.
Yes, there's a definite power differential there.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's unsavory, to say the least, no matter what. And apparently this was something that was known in the village. Some of the sources said it was known, and...
I'm sure that's not uncommon.
Yeah. So he could have fathered the child. Her own father could have fathered her child. One of the facts quoted to combat that allegation was the fact that Joseph didn't seem to have any developmental disabilities. Therefore, he could not be a product of incest. I don't think that's 100%.
Right. I don't believe that 100% of the time there's issues.
No. Also, he was only 2 years old when he died.
There could be a lot unknown.
There could be a lot. Yeah. So anyway, what was his name? Because I abbreviated it thinking I'll remember it. Schlittenbauer. When Schlittenbauer and his friends came to investigate, they had to break open the door to the barn because it was locked. But when they approached the house, he produced from his pocket a key for the lock. And he insisted on going in by himself. If he was Victoria's lover, then it might make sense that he had a key. He claimed later, and because he entered by himself and they questioned that, he claimed later that he was looking for his son. Now, police suspected him because he disturbed the bodies at the scene, making the investigation harder. And while the suspicions against him continued until the day he died, he did eventually win several civil suits for slander against his name because there was no proof.
Okay.
So, hey, let's have a deathbed confession. In 1951, Crescentia Meyer claimed her brothers Adolf and Anton had committed the murders. Adolf was already dead, and Anton was taken into custody and investigated and then released due to lack of evidence. In 1971, which is almost 50 years after the murder, a woman wrote to the police about an incident from her childhood. A woman visiting her mother claimed that her two sons, Carl and Andreas, were the murderers and that Andreas had lamented the loss of his penknife at the scene. Now, it is true that they turned up an unidentified penknife at the scene, or what I mean by that is they turned up a penknife at the scene and they couldn't immediately say, oh, this was his or this was hers. Or
his initials weren't carved into it.
Exactly. It was a fucking penknife. So, however, the maid, there weren't any distinguishing characteristics on it. And the former maid said she had seen that knife around the farmstead.
Fair.
Now, a man named Joseph Betts claimed that he had roomed with a man named Peter Weber in 1919-1920 when they were working at the same place. And Weber had claimed to know about a wealthy man on a remote farm that they could kill and rob. So when Betts wouldn't go along with the plan, Weber stopped talking about it. So, Betts tried to pin it on Weber. Now, the former maid accused two men who temporarily worked on the farm. She also accused the Thaler brothers, who were local burglars. Now, interestingly, to me, maybe things here in Bavaria in 1922 were vastly beyond my understanding. But she claims all these men showed up at her bedroom window to ask for information about the family, like where they stored the money and what
there was just a nice line at her bedroom window.
That's kind of what it sounds like. They came to my bedroom window and asked me to tell them about the family, and I refused.
It's a burglar booth.
Apparently.
Instead of a kissing booth.
Yes. But she said she refused to give them information.
All right. She's accusing a lot of people.
She really is.
Who of them would have a reason to live up there for 6 months and not be seen elsewhere, or like in their attic, or were they only there sometimes, and then why? And
there's so many questions that were never answered. So this is my favorite. Last but not least, author Bill James believes that the murderer was Paul Mueller, who was a German immigrant to the U.S. who fled back to Germany when he fell under suspicion. James believed that Mueller committed several murders across the U.S., including killing 2 families in the same night in Colorado Springs with an axe, which takes us right back to our
Fucking
first
A, man.
podcast.
Everybody's in Colorado.
That was the murder I talked about on our first
That's
episode.
funny.
And I was like, oh my God, I have to do this one. It was kismet. It was...
That must be what made you do an unsolved murder, since you don't like the unsolved.
I don't. I really like an ending.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. I want an ending. So yeah, he believed, and there were other people have believed that the murder here in Colorado Springs, the axe murder, was... some believe it was purely a crime of opportunity, and some believed that it was the work of a serial killer. And some think he started in Oregon or California and came east. Some think he started in Colorado Springs and moved east. This guy makes the case that he started in Colorado Springs, fled east, and eventually fled back to Germany. So despite several arrests, the charges never stuck. The murderer was never found. The case was closed officially in 1955, and the house has since been demolished. And they have had modern criminologists and forensic people go back and look at what was done, and they don't fault the police. They say they did what they could at the time. Of course, it's easy to look back and say, oh, well, they could have done this,
and
that,
also
or the other
with
thing.
like 20 people having trod through there at some point before.
Exactly. Tracking in the dirt and the mud and the snow. But they've all said the police did everything they should have, and there's no obvious answer. There's no, oh my God, well, obviously it was the village blacksmith or whatever. So, yeah, it's an unsolved.
I'd be interested in them if they could do genetic testing on the bodies and find out who the father is, or who the father isn't of the...
That's interesting.
Because you'd think...
I don't know if there is enough left. Because I don't know. I do not know what happened to the bodies.
Yeah. I don't know either.
But it would, but somebody would have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Because DNA testing is not cheap.
There are enough true crime fans out there that they would probably put together the money pretty quickly if they ever made a call for...
That's true.
Donations.
We are not making that call.
We are not. This is non-existent as far as we know.
But also... It would solve curiosity into who was or was not the child's father, but...
I mean, not the murderer, but
yeah.
It would answer. And the thing is, I don't know if, in various countries, if they're even willing to ever pull bodies out of, if they're in a grave or something like that, like we do here, so...
And the likelihood, since it happened so long, 1922, the likelihood that of the murderer still being alive or them being able to do anything, what would they do? Persecute his family if he had any?
Yeah, but this is like Jack the Ripper to people. This is like Dietlef Pass. This is one of the bigs in those of us who enjoy unsolved mysteries. So it doesn't matter. People still want to know who Jack the Ripper was too.
Yeah. I mean, I want to know, but I'm not. I guess it's just not.
I find it insanely creepy because, like when the news, what was it, a New York apartment or something where somebody was living up in the...
Yes.
Whatever they were living in, that was such a big deal. And it's like, okay, well, it's happened before. Who knows how many times it's happened and not been caught. But that's creepy. Your home is supposed to be the one place you feel safe. And so stories like this one always disturb that because they weren't safe in their home. And maybe whoever it was didn't intend to kill people and then did finally get caught night or something.
Yeah, it's like, why did they have to kill the whole family?
Right. What was the baby going to do? Finger you?
I was going to say a 2-year-old can't identify you. And so and they were killed in the barn. So say the farmer catches you and you kill the farmer. Why do you have to then go pull everybody else out and kill all of them?
Well, that's the thing, which I find interesting with the people who think it was 2 people that did it. But then again, that goes back to then who was in the attic and was it somebody completely different? And did they witness what happened? Then they took care of the farm for a couple days and then took off. Because they're already, if there was already somebody living up there, they could be completely apart from who killed everybody.
That's true.
Somebody else could have come and killed them and they were like, oh shit, son. And then they went out and fed this livestock. And then they figure out where to go because maybe they thought for a couple days, should I turn them in? Should I say what I saw?
Yeah, because there was very definite proof that it was after it was obviously easy to tell that the family had been killed, except for the 2 in the house, that everybody had been killed in the barn.
Yeah.
But it very definitely, too, they could tell people had been cooking and eating in the kitchen. There was meat carved off of the pantry. out of the pantry. And there were a couple of other things I can't remember. But they said specifically what they were, what the items were that they could tell. And I'm like, so somebody's obviously feeding the dog, or else the dog's going to be barking nonstop. And why wasn't the dog barking? Mm-hmm. That was one of the cases they made for it being the neighbor. Yeah. Oh, no, it wasn't the neighbor. It was somebody else. One of the other people, one of the workers.
Floss and Blotter.
Him. No, one of the former maid, one of the people she accused, she goes, you know what? The dog never barked at him. I'm like, really? How much attention were you paying?
You bring a little bit of cow meat. Dog's cool with you anyway.
Yeah. That is true. So what are you going to talk about?
I'm doing the Boogeyman of Westfield. And this is another one. It's notorious. There is a solution to it, but it has always bothered me. I pull it up for my husband all the time. I'm like, listen, if things are ever bad, if you ever lose your job, you just tell me. You don't have to be embarrassed about it. Please don't murder us. So anyway, their sources are Wikipedia, ABC News, Murderpedia, all that's interesting in the lineup. All right. So John Emil List was born September 17th, 1925 in Bay City, Michigan. He was the only child of a Lutheran Sunday school teacher and his wife. He enlisted in the Army in 1943, serving as a lab tech in World War II. My dad was a lab tech in the Air Force. After leaving the Army, he got a business degree, followed by a master's in accounting. He was then recalled to active duty in 1950 during the Korean War.
Okay.
They moved him to Fort Eustis, Virginia, which is where he met his future wife, Helen Taylor. Her first husband was killed in action in Korea, and so she was a single mom. Her daughter, Brenda, was from that first marriage. John and Helen got married December 1st, 1951 in Baltimore, Maryland, before moving to California, where Liz worked in the finance corps. He left the military again in 1952. It's very interesting to me that they pulled him back during wartime, but then he didn't even actually go overseas. Mm-hmm. So he was just doing his stuff. Anyway, he left again in 1952, eventually ending up working for a paper company in Kalamazoo. I just like saying Kalamazoo. I would probably be so cheerful if I moved to Kalamazoo, Michigan at first, because I'd be like, where do you live? Kalamazoo. Okay. They had 3 children together in Kalamazoo. Then after several job changes and moves, they ended up in Westfield, New Jersey, and that's where they kind of finally settled. This move included his mother, who came to live with them. Whether that was because Helen had become an alcoholic or because his mother was in need, I wasn't able to find that out, why she moved in with them. Brenda, Helen's daughter from her previous marriage, had grown up, gotten married, and moved out by this time.
Okay.
So they just had their 3 together kids there. The family was quiet, but well enough liked. They lived in a mansion in a rich neighborhood, though the mansion was somewhat outside of List's ability to pay for it. List had followed in his father's footsteps and taught Sunday school for his church when he wasn't at the bank, at which he was a vice president and comptroller. The kids were involved in various after-school activities like sports. So, I mean, a normal family is the scene we're setting here. However, on November 9th, 1971, Liz took 2 guns he'd been practicing with at the range and used one first to shoot Helen in the back of her head while she was drinking her morning coffee. He basically saw the kids out. He went out to his car, loaded the guns, came back inside. He then went to his 84-year-old mother, Alma, who had an apartment on the upper floor, kissed her on the head, and he would later in an interview say he felt like Judas, then shot her above the left eye. He put his wife's body on a sleeping bag and dragged it to the ballroom. Because they had a room.
They had a ballroom?
It was a mansion, and it had a ballroom.
Wow.
And he cleaned up all the evidence of her murder on the main floor so his children wouldn't be alarmed when they got home. With hours to go until his kids got home.
Thoughtful.
Oh, this man, he was very methodical. He went to the bank, and he cashed out both his and his mother's bank accounts. He stopped deliveries of the newspaper, milk, mail, wrote letters to the kids at school and their part-time jobs to let them know the family would be away visiting his wife's ill mother. He let everybody, the church choir, know that the one that was in that wouldn't be there. He just very calmly went through all this. Then he went home, made himself lunch, and sat at the table where he'd killed his wife. His 16-year-old daughter, Patricia, called home and said she felt sick and asked him to come get her. So he went and picked her up, brought her into the house, walked up behind her, shot her in the back of the head, put her on a sleeping bag, dragged her into the ballroom. They camped, so they all had a sleeping bag. Okay. Then he went and he picked Frederick up from his part-time job and he brought him home and then he shot him. Did the, same old.
How old was Frederick?
13 maybe.
Okay.
John Jr., I forgot to put it in there, who was 15. John Jr. had a soccer game at school. So John went, sat in the stands, watched his son play his game.
That is cold.
Cold as balls. With the game over, Liz drove his son home and attempted to shoot him. John Jr., there's evidence he fought back and that there was a misfire, but his father did ultimately kill him, and it took several rounds. He actually emptied both guns. And this, by the way, was his favorite child. It was his namesake. It was his oldest son. He was his favorite. Okay. So, Liz put everyone but his mother on sleeping bags, covered their faces, so they each had like a piece of cloth over their faces, and lined their bodies up in the ballroom. His mother weighed too much for him to move her, he said later, so she remained in her apartment where he'd shot her. So, her face, he did get covered, but she didn't have a sleeping bag, so I guess he didn't care if she was comfortable. All of the crime scenes got cleaned up before Liz removed himself from all the family photos. He went through and cut himself out of every single photo he was in.
Okay.
Then he sat down and he wrote several letters to relatives, to the guy who he'd bought the house from, to tell him how nice a house it was and how grateful he was they'd gotten to live in it. And then he wrote one to his pastor, claiming he'd killed his family because of all the evil in the world. He felt that killing them would save their souls and keep them from having to deal with the awfulness of the world. Then he had dinner alone at the dining room table once again. He'd cleaned up, and then he went to bed and he slept in the home where his dead family were lying in a room nearby. Then he got up and prepared to leave. Before leaving the house with his and his mother's money, he turned on a radio to a religious, some places said it was a religious music station. Some said he just had religious music playing on a loop. But they did have a house intercom. So he turned on the intercom and it played throughout the house. Then he turned the thermostat down to keep it nice and cool, and he turned all the lights on, fed the kids pet fish, and left. It was almost exactly a month later, on November 9th, 1971, that neighbors became concerned about the family, because he had done his due diligence. Everybody knew they were going. Neighbors knew they were going to travel. Right. So they knew that they were supposed to be out of town, and that's maybe why they figured all the lights were left on. I've never heard a theory for why they were like, that's totally normal.
A month, though. That's a long time.
Yep. The lights had started burning out. So then once it was out, it wouldn't get replaced. And so they were kind of noticing, but they're, whatever. This is a Richie Rich neighborhood. All's well. And then, but they had also, again, kept to themselves so much. The neighbors are like, it's not unusual, whatever. And he had told people that they were traveling to North Carolina to visit his wife Helen's mom because she was ill, right? And so it was a fact that she was sick, actually. So it was known. She had talked about it. She had been supposed to come out to visit and had to cancel because she was ill. And so, of course, the wife had told people. Patricia, that daughter, her drama teacher, was concerned. Actually, he was the one who was like, no, something's weird about her month-long absence because it just didn't make sense for them to pull their kids for that long. And so he showed up to the house with another teacher, and the neighbors thought he was burgling because he was looking in windows. And so they called the police then because they were like, well, they're out of town still, and there's somebody trying to get in their house. So police officers, they come, they talk to people. They're like, okay, well, this is weird. What do you mean the lights have been on except for, And so they break in a lower window and they go search the house. And the one who found them thought it was just like a pile of dirty clothes. He walks into this, and it stank. They smelled it as soon as they broke in. But it just looked like dirty clothes, But no, it was people who'd been moldering for a month.
Oh.
So this became the most notorious crime in New Jersey since the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby. Yep.
Wow.
Because
I mean, this is some mega.
This is some big freaky. You're not safe in your own home with your own husband shit.
Batshit bug fuck banana sandwich crazy,
right? So because he had cut himself out of every single picture, police didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, there were no photographs for them to release to the public that were current. They had some crappy ones from other people maybe.
Oh my God.
That was it. So they couldn't even be like, whoo, here he is. Look for him. They found his car at JFK Airport in New York City.
Okay.
But his name didn't appear in any flight list. They couldn't track. There was no evidence that they could find. Nobody having seen this shitty picture of this person that had flown out. So they didn't know. The house was burned down in August 1972, and it was considered arson, but the arsonists were never found. And a new home was built there 2 years later. So I named it the Boogeyman of Westfield because he did become the Boogeyman of Westfield. I mean, it was pretty much assumed it was him because of the pictures and him writing the letters and all this. There was not a question. They didn't think he'd been kidnapped or something.
No.
But parents apparently still talk about the Boogeyman of Westfield to their kids. And I think that's a terrible threat to use on your kids, because aren't you really saying your dad's going to kill you? But anyway.
Yeah.
In May 1989, List Murders appeared on America's Most Wanted. It was in its first season. A forensic artist named Frank Bender had created an age progression bust in clay by consulting the photos they did have and his parents, and looking at how they looked and how the father had aged.
Well, I would think if they went to...
He was in the military, too.
Yes, so they would have some pictures. If they went to the wife's mother, she should have had a wedding picture at least.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he consulted with a forensic psychologist. They came up with a whole psychological evaluation of him. What would he be doing now? What would he look like? How would he be? So he aged the bust, right? And then that's what they showed on America's Most Wanted. And betwixt them, they had decided that he wouldn't be vain enough to wear contacts, even though that was more common now. Mm-hmm. So he would still be wearing glasses, but they felt that he would wear thick frame glasses, and it would be almost a way as a disguise and a shame cover up. And, so he'd have these thick ones instead of the slimmer ones that were starting to come more into fashion. I mean, starting. It's 1989. So anyway, he was sure that he would have this. It took less than 2 weeks for an ex-neighbor in Denver, Colorado, to call in a man named Bob Clark. And it was like Robert Peter Clark or something. He was arrested at his accounting firm in Richmond, where he had moved from Denver, but he had lived in Denver for quite a while. And he was extradited back to New Jersey to be tried. When arrested, he was wearing glasses exactly like Bender had put on the bust, and he looked astonishingly. I will be posting the side-by-sides.
Nice.
It's amazing. It's mind-blowing. So anyway, he looked so similar to it, and it worked, right? So evidence from the crime scene and his fingerprints from military records, all of that were used to confirm his identity, because he kept saying, no, I'm Bob Clark. And he kept going anyway. And where he'd gotten the name was Bob Clark was a classmate of his in school. And the thing, when they talked to Clark, he had no idea he didn't remember him from school or anything. It was just such a plain name that he probably, Once more information came out. The FBI found that after the murders, List had actually taken a train, leaving his car at the airport to mislead authorities and taking a bus from there to the train. And then he'd moved to Denver by way of Michigan again. And he took on that false identity and lived there working at a paper box manufacturer while volunteering at a local Lutheran church. He was known to drive people who couldn't get places. So he was doing all this charitable work for church. It was at a church gathering that he met Dolores Miller, and they got married in 1985. So about 4 years before he got tracked down, moving 3 years later to Virginia, where he found a job as an accountant again. It turned out that he and Dolores had been watching America's Most Wanted and caught the end of the episode about him, and she didn't recognize him.
Oh my God.
His wife. And again, wait till y'all look at the picture and how similar it is to him. Okay, during the trial, List claimed that Helen's alcoholism and syphilis, which she did have and had gotten diagnosed with and was having issues because of health issues. And she had actually known she had it and hid it from him before they got married. It was from her former husband, which, what was he doing in Korea and in his other military movements? Okay, so anyway, and he had then gotten laid off from work. But here was the thing. He was so humiliated at having lost his job that he didn't tell anyone. And he continued getting up every morning, doing his routine, going out in his suit.
Like that Michael Douglas movie.
Yep. And then he sat at the bus station reading the newspaper and trying to figure out what to do. And it wasn't until, now the threat of foreclosure on the house was coming. And that wasn't okay. He did start siphoning money off from his mom's bank account. And that is actually why his kids were encouraged to get part-time jobs. He told them it was so they would learn responsibility and contribute to the family and maturity, but it was really because he wasn't making any money, so he was making them make money.
How long was he laid off before he killed his family?
I'm not sure. It really didn't say. It was...
Because I'm just how long did it take him to get from point A to point B? Was it...
I think it was a couple months.
It had to
that
have
he
been.
Did this.
For
it to reach foreclosure, although it sounds like he was maybe a little... He couldn't really afford... He was house poor.
Right. So it wouldn't take much to topple that house of cards.
No. And obviously that means there wasn't savings, and that's why he was ripping off his mom.
And because my other question while you were talking, I was thinking, well, why didn't his work look for him? Because he didn't have a job.
That's why they didn't notice.
There was no boss to look for him.
Interestingly, the reason he and his wife had gotten married in Maryland was because she insisted on it. Because they weren't living in Maryland when he met her. They were in Virginia, but they got married in Baltimore. She insisted on it because, as it turns out, it was the place in that surrounding area that didn't require syphilis tests before you got married.
Oh.
He also claimed she had tricked him into getting married by claiming she was pregnant and then found out it was a lie after they were married. Her health having deteriorated over the years, she became an, quote, unkempt and paranoid recluse. And according to his testimony, she mocked him all the time. She diminished him sexually. She compared him unfavorably to her previous husband. So she was giving, being all overall nasty. And she was drinking, right? So, I mean, you can just kind of picture her behavior.
Pardon my ignorance. Is syphilis uncurable?
I don't know. Never had it. But I mean, that's the thing. Well, no, I think it's treatable. If I recall, it wasn't before a certain date, but by this time it should have been.
I'm going to quickly Google syphilis.
Okay.
Because
that's one of the theories with Jack the Ripper is that somebody had syphilis that had gone to reach the point where there's a term for it, where it starts to affect you mentally.
I have heard of that.
But I could swear it's treatable, and it's just that some people didn't get treatment for it or didn't know about it or whatever.
Oh, it's treated with penicillin.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like a simple infection.
Why couldn't she?
Maybe it reaches a certain point after a while.
Yeah, okay.
His daughter Patricia had expressed interest in becoming an actress, which he felt was sinful. He felt that acting was sinful. This built up with the rest of his issues to make him claim that his family would succumb to sin if they continued in this way. He was panicking. She was the oldest, right? And so he saw her going into sin, and surely the others would follow. And yada, yada, yada. Psychiatrists at his court case felt he was making up excuses to make himself feel better about killing his family.
Yeah.
Okay. List was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. Here we are with OCD again by the court-appointed psychiatrist. The psychiatrist claimed that the OCD made List feel like he had only two options, welfare or murder, and welfare was unacceptable because it would be humiliating. He felt it was his job to care for his family and take care of them. He'd been brought up, apparently his father wasn't great, and he'd been brought up that it was his job, and that he, at some point in an interview later, said it wasn't okay that I couldn't support them. So, of course, this meant to him murder was the best plan, because somehow that's less of a sin and less humiliating. Okay. See why I was so mind blown about the Christian father in the last episode?
Yeah.
Because the way they twist their brains up, which also is a big part of that miniseries happening right now. What is that? Midnight Mass?
Yes.
The psychiatrist, Dr. Stephen Simmering, also said he showed, quote, no evidence of anything that approached genuine remorse, and that he was, quote, a cold man.
Sociopath?
Could be. Sounds like it. If you can just that meticulously doing people you're supposed to love.
Yeah, your children.
Yeah. And his mother, who he didn't have any problems with. List felt suicide would be no good because he wouldn't go to heaven if he committed suicide after murdering his family. Apparently, the pearly gates would remain open over just a little murder spree, right? That's fine. He did at one point say he would, he figured he'd just ask God for forgiveness for that one. So why couldn't you ask? Because you'd be dead, I guess. So you can't ask for forgiveness after suicide. I guess you can't do it ahead of time either. You can't preload.
Right.
Preload that confession.
No.
Whatever.
I'm like,
April 12th.
my brain hurts. Thank you.
His logic, from his attempts at spinning something to be reasonable. I don't know. April 12th, 1990, he was found guilty of 5 counts of first-degree murder because he had planned everything in advance and there was so much evidence of that.
Yeah.
List did not take responsibility. He stated, quote, I feel that because of my mental state at the time, I was unaccountable for what happened. I ask all affected by this for their forgiveness, understanding, and prayer. Luckily, the judge found him to be full of shit and stated, quote, John Emil List is without remorse and without honor. And I bet that last one dug at him more than the rest of it.
Yep.
End quote. The judge then listed his victims. He said he listed each of them and said he wanted to make sure their voices were heard in this courtroom, like this judge. And then he imposed the maximum penalty of 5 life sentences to be served consecutively. Of course, List appealed.
Of course.
His first appeal was based on him claiming now, it had never come up before, that he had PTSD from the war. Can I just remind people he was a lab tech? His second claim was that his letter to his pastor should have been protected communication, so should not have been inadmissible. So anyway, he failed his appeal. Finally, in 2002, Connie Chung interviewed him. He did say he wished he hadn't done it and that he knew it was wrong while he was doing it. However, he also said, quote, I feel when we get to heaven, we don't worry about these earthly things, or we won't worry about these earthly things. They'll either have forgiven me or won't realize, what happened. He further explained the killings by saying the financial hardship would have turned them away from their religion and he couldn't let that happen. Some disturbing quotes from the Connie Chung interview. These are all quotes. About seeing his wife and kids in heaven. I'm sure if we recognize each other that we'll like each other's company just as we did here when times were better. I finally decided the only way to save them from that was to kill them. Hopefully they would go to heaven and then maybe I would have a chance to later confess my sins to God and get forgiveness. It's just like D-Day. You go in, there's no stopping after you start.
Oh my God.
About sitting down to have lunch in the middle of the killings. I was hungry, he told Downtown, adding with a chuckle, that's just the way it is. Hurty, hurt.
Was he hungry or was he hangry?
He was. He needed a Snickers.
Fuck.
About the overkill used to kill John Jr. I don't know whether it was only because he was still jerking that I wanted to make sure that he didn't suffer, or that it was sort of a way of relieving tension, after having completed what I felt was my assignment for the day. March 21st, 2008, John List died of complications from pneumonia. The New Jersey Star-Ledger called him the Boogeyman of Westfield in their article about his death, and that is when that started. At first, no one would claim his body, including his wife Dolores. Ultimately, someone did, but I couldn't find out who, and he was buried, I believe, in the same cemetery as his mom. Fun fact, the FBI seriously considered him as a suspect for the D.B. Cooper incident involving a man claiming to be named Dan or D.B. Cooper, who jumped from a plane with $200,000 and was never found again. They seriously investigated him for it because the timing worked out. It was actually the same month and year.
Wow.
So that would have happened right after the murders. They did ultimately decide it wasn't him.
I don't think, no.
And that's the Boogeyman of Westfield.
So the one question I have is her daughter from the first marriage. I'm surprised she didn't go looking for her mother.
I mean, it was a month. I've probably gone a month without talking to my mom.
That's very true.
Because I have children and...
Yeah, and if they weren't living...
Yeah.
Like, near each other. If they were on the other side of the country, you don't call... Because of the time difference. Yeah, okay.
And if she missed her once or twice, they had church activities. And they had... The kids had jobs and activities. So maybe it wouldn't be unusual.
Yeah.
And there wouldn't have been answering machines. So it's not like...
When was it?
There? 19... Well, maybe... Yeah, there would have been. 1970s? What was that? I don't remember. He was caught in the 80s.
Maybe not. Yeah. So maybe, I don't think in the 70s. Well, he was rich, so maybe.
I have no idea. So anyway, that's just...
What
I just
piece
don't
of
think
shit.
That's the thing. This is why this one sticks out. There are many murder-suicides. They are frequently, when you look at them, about job loss or some humiliation like that they don't want to share. But this one stuck out to me always, because he did not commit suicide afterwards. They almost always commit suicide afterwards.
I feel so bad about losing my job and not being able to support my family.
I'm going to kill all of you.
I will kill all of them.
And then I'm going to remarry. You piece of shit, really.
Can you imagine knowing that was what you had married?
No, I was, now there were no statements or anything from her that I found or anything, but the fact that she didn't claim his body, at least at first, tells me what I need to know.
Yeah.
I doubt he was visiting or she was visiting him or whatever. So
I'd be like, what? That doesn't even, damn.
Do you want to ask her a question?
I'm just sitting here shaking my head. I am still stunned by this story. So, actually, it's not a question. It's a request this time.
That's true.
Since we talked about families, we would like you...
In a manner of speaking.
Yeah, well, we did. What we would like is for you to tell us something interesting about your family. Now, this can be a colorful character. It can be your family when you were growing up. It can be the family you've built now.
Something goofy that happened.
For God's sake, give us something goofy and lighthearted. Because after this week, we could really use it.
Yeah, I think a couple weeks ago we were like, we need to lighten it up, and then we didn't.
And then boom, boom, boom. I know, and I usually do the goofy, funny ones, and I'm just like, now let's talk about murder. And then let's talk about more murder and unsolved murder. And
Yeah.
I will try to find something goofy and lighter for next week.
But I'm not going to promise anything.
No.
So you can reach us at mysteriesmonstersmayhem@gmail.com. The website is mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com. And there's a form there if you want to submit any stories to us ever to read on here. And please like, rate, share, review, all that good stuff so that it gets the word out and gets more listeners. And thank you for listening.
Yes, and you can always communicate with us on Facebook.
True that.
Because we there. I'm always there.
Too much. Bye.
Bye-bye. Talk to you next week.